Bitcoin itself is not inherently partisan, but we live in a partisan and a political world. The question, is Bitcoin good, is a completely separate question than, do my ideological opponents like Bitcoin? If a thing is true, it is true, regardless of who likes the fact that it's true. Over the last 5 years, I have personally played a role in over $10 billion of Bitcoin going into self-custody. There are more Bitcoin in self-custody today because there are ways to buy Bitcoin which are not self-custody.
Welcome back to another episode of How to Sell Bitcoin. I am your host, Q, a member of the Swan private team, and I am joined by none other than the step champion of the world and VP of Investor Relations of Nakamoto, Stephen Lubka. Stephen, thank you again for taking the time to sit down and chat with me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to do this series. It's been, I think there's been some good reception. It's been fun to do it, and just a nice way to reflect on everything we've built this last 5 years.
It's truly incredible. And at the time of this recording, we've actually only released one episode so far, but I've had DMs, comments, as well as some emails coming in thanking us for this. So I'm excited for you guys to continue along on eavesdropping on this conversation, if you will. But Stephen, I kind of want to now talk. We spent a lot of time in the last episode just talking about actively listening and being a participant in someone's orange pilling journey. But let's talk about the first date, the real conversation after you've convinced them, hey, Bitcoin is necessary. They are bought into that. What does that first date, the first dance look like when you're actually talking to these people?
So there's two things, right? There's two sales. There's selling Bitcoin, and then there's selling yourself or the company you represent or the service you're providing, or whatever you have there, right? So it's like on one hand it's, hey, this is why you should own Bitcoin, and then on the others, hey, this is why you should work with me, or you should work with us, or you should use this product to access, to use, to guide, whatever it is with Bitcoin. And so that second part, it's really more about the relationship between you and the client. So you've already demonstrated some level of knowledge in regards to Bitcoin itself, and that this is a good idea. But then there's kind of a different relationship that's going on where I think you want to reveal two things. You want to reveal, again, knowledge and trust. So these are kind of these twin pillars. So it's both that you have sufficient expertise, that you are sufficiently knowledgeable where what they are getting from engaging with you is a relationship with either an expert or at least somebody who has sufficiently more expertise than they do. And so they're gaining knowledge that they don't have to go through trials and tribulations to get. And so you're demonstrating insight. You're demonstrating expertise. I actually think insight is the more operative word. And the thing I would always want people to demonstrate is not a regurgitation of facts, but a display of earned insight. And what I mean by that is that they could make at least semi-novel observations, semi-novel insights. That's not me saying no one has ever thought this about Bitcoin before you, but it's not just like a blasé regurgitation of like, yeah, there's 21 million Bitcoin, it launched in this year, this is who Satoshi was, right? Those are just like facts. Those are just like, here are the facts about the thing. What I'm looking for is insight, some sort of composition of your years spent watching Bitcoin, watching the market, watching people engage in Bitcoin, and saying, hey, the thing I've learned during this time is this. This is what I've learned. And you want to display that. And then on a secondary basis, it's the relationship, it's what it feels like to work for you, with you, what your values are, how you do that relationship, and also the organization or company that you're part of.
No, a lot of what you said, I loved and it made sense. It is an art of two sales. First, it's the Bitcoin hump. getting them on board with this idea of what this new asset class is and why it's necessary for them. And then the second layer of that is actually convincing them to trust you as an individual as well as the company that you're at. Um, I want to talk a little bit first on a more personal side. Like what are things that you like to do to instill that trust in complete strangers as fast as possible on an individual level?
Yeah, so anybody that's watched the first couple episodes probably won't be surprised by my answer, but you can't instill that trust. You can only just put all your cards on the table. And what I mean by that is reveal yourself. Like, the best way you're going to build trust is just to fully reveal who you are in an authentic way. You have to abandon this pursuit of trying to compose an image, trying to come off a certain way, trying to use certain techniques, and it's just about having an actual conversation. In this, there's this concept of you should take risks which don't benefit you. And that may sound counterintuitive. What I mean by that is there's actually, paradoxically, one of the best things you can do is take conversational or like quasi-emotional risks. What I mean by that is like, give your honest opinion about something that might be controversial. Like, not like controversial, like it's like a hot button issue or whatever, like that's fine, I guess, but just that you don't know that the client's gonna feel the same way, right? Like, you're gonna give a comment on something that's like, it could be something simple. Like for me, right, it's like, hey, I'm gonna talk about, like, oh yeah, like I'm really into, oh, you live here, you live in Florida? I'm also in Florida. I love the sun. Like, I moved here for the sun. I think it's like essential for human health. I have a kind of Twitter profile about it. Now, why is that, like, there's no benefit for me there, right? Like, that doesn't help me close a sale. That's not about the product. It's not about you're going to make money. It's just saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm into. Now, the reason I'm saying it's a conversational risk is because maybe they're, a fucking dermatologist. You know what I mean? Maybe they think they might think I'm totally crazy or whatever. Maybe they're using sunscreen every day. Maybe they really care about skin aging, and I come off as just like, I completely disagree with this guy. That's why it's a conversational risk. But the simultaneous thing that you engender in that conversation is, this guy is being honest with me. This guy is being authentic with me. This guy is like, this isn't a sales tactic. This isn't like a product spiel. It's not, what have you. This is just a human that is meeting me and being honest. And so I think it's just talk, and there's an art to this. It isn't that like, I think everybody on the Swan private team should just like blitz into these calls, like just talking about whatever like interest they have with abandon or just like throwing random stuff at the wall. There's an art to it, right? Like there's an art because you're doing two things. You're conveying expertise and you're revealing yourself. And you have to balance between the two of those. And so you need to come off as knowledgeable. You do. You have to have developed something. You have to develop knowledge and insight. But then you also need to do away with this facade of presentation. You have to do away with this thing that people do where I am presenting myself to you in a way that is designed to be consumed, that is designed to be received in a certain way. And you got to just put your cards on the table. And anything you lose via those conversational risks on like, hey, you might have a different opinion on something, you might have a disagreement, I think you generally speaking gain in the person being like, oh, okay, like this guy isn't trying to sell me. It's not, this isn't this thing. Like I'm actually just talking to somebody. And that needs to be married to that you actually are trustworthy and that you aren't trying to like, get them to do something. Like all of these things need to be in place. But yeah, that's how I'd view it.
No, I love that. I mean, first off, my favorite part of that entire conversation is how you essentially have equated dermatologists to be the antithesis to your entire walking persona. I find that quite comical, but I also think it's a really important touch point too, because you're humanizing yourself. You're not just someone on the phone, on the other end of the phone, or someone else on a Zoom call. It's like, no, I myself also have interests. I want to kind of go down this rabbit hole for just a second, because it was something that I had the pleasure of participating in a conversation on a roundtable with some Swan private clients. And obviously over the course of the last, I'd say like 2 years, but especially the last 12 months in particular, Bitcoin has become a very political issue. It is
Sure.
no longer bipartisan.
Sure.
And on this call, one of the clients brought up some concerns about just the way it seems that Bitcoin has become like a very Trump thing. It's very aligned with Trump. And so as a result, you hear Maxine Waters, for example, come out and say, well, if Trump likes this, then we as Democrats should not. Let's talk a little bit about threading this needle, because I think it is a really important point, something that our entire ecosystem needs to still learn and is figuring out how to balance this nuance, while at the same time, specific for Swan in particular, like it's the age old saying that Michael Jordan said, like, Democrats and Republicans buy shoes, Democrats and Republicans buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? It's Bitcoin itself is not inherently partisan, but we live in a partisan and a political world. Both of these things are true. And so while Bitcoin is not inherently a left-wing or a right-wing thing, it is, in many ways, the world's greatest asset and something which is growing so rapidly and provides benefits to people regardless of their political orientation or where they live or what have you. If you own Bitcoin, you own Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is not inherently partisan in that way. However, within that, the act of the way in which Bitcoin sits within a political system, the system we live in, obviously it's not separate from politics, right? And it's much better to have one ally than no allies, right? This is a simple fact, in my opinion. There's only a few edge cases where maybe that's not true. But like the prior state for Bitcoin, before the recent embrace by the political right, was an embrace by nobody, right? Like it was that nobody embraced it, and the only way you can have, I think, like a really material issue with the fact that the right has embraced Bitcoin is, and I say this with a lot of empathy, but you have to have, there's a level of dehumanization that has to happen first, right? You're talking about half the country. I don't think half the country are bad people, right? And this goes for both the right and the left as they view each other. I think it's important to realize that, like, these are people. We're dealing with people. We're being with human beings with hopes and dreams and desires that want a good life for themselves. And like, yeah, there's going to be disagreements on what path you take there. But like the moment we let ideological differences occupy the foreground and our common kind of shared humanity occupy the background, we've inverted this thing. Like, we're people first, and then we have ideological differences. And writing off entire parts of the world, entire groups of people, or entire technologies because people that you have an ideological difference with like it is just, it is not the way I would recommend anybody navigate the world, right? And I say that specifically, the way someone would navigate the world. And what I mean by that is that we all wake up every morning and we have to make sense of the world in order to take action in it. Whether that's online, that's in our job, that's the decisions we make, the ideas we support, right? So every day we have to do it. And we're all using models, ideas, thoughts, and analysis of the world of this is what's good, this is what's bad, this is what these people are doing, this is what this technology is. And I would say that it is inadvisable for no other reason than it is inaccurate to try to make sense of the world based primarily in ideological factions. And I'm in this group, these people are in this group, anything they like is bad, anything we like is good, right? This is this base tribal information processing system that all humans have within them, and I'm not criticizing. I'm actually just saying it's ineffective. It's inefficient. And you will be less successful at navigating reality if this is the primary processing system, right? And I'm saying this because I want people to be successful at navigating reality. What I mean by that is that the actual enemy here is not people of a different ideological faction. It is the situation itself. It is not enemy, but like reality, right? Like when you're trying to build a rocket or you're trying to build a plane or you're trying to build a company, generally speaking, your problem isn't other people. It is solving a problem in reality. It is that you need to figure out how to build a technology that can allow the plane to take off. Other people aren't your problem. Reality is the hurdle you have to overcome, the laws of physics. And in so many cases, like, we're not up against other people, we're up against situations. And if you allow your navigation of situations to be primarily rooted in the ideological ties, you know, it's like changing a math formula because you don't like the guy that wrote it, right? It's just it's not going to work too well.
So you're saying math is racist. Got it.
Math is math, you know. Like there is common reality. There are common facts. There are, like, if a thing is true, it is true, regardless of who likes the fact that it's true. That's actually a decent point. So, something being true is a completely different thing than who enjoys the fact that this is true. Does that make sense? Like, it's just a different thing.
It goes back to the idea of like perception and reality, and like how each of us perceive this fact could in turn dictate how we then like expose it and talk about it and how we process this information going forward as well.
Yeah, like you could have something that's like X, I don't know, like, okay, let's make this kind of neutral. X college graduates are overrepresented in CEO positions or something, right? Like the people that go to this college are more likely to be CEOs. Let's assume that's true. That's a true statement. Then on top of that, there's people that think it's good that that happens, and there's people that think it's bad that that happens. And those people disagree on whether it is good or bad. This is fundamentally interpretive. But that's a very different thing than the observation that as a group, these people are excessively represented, right? And we need to at least be able to agree on that sort of common baseline fact, and then you can disagree on top of that. And I think it's a similar thing with Bitcoin, to bring it back. It's like, the question, is Bitcoin good, is a completely separate question than, do my ideological opponents like Bitcoin?
100%. And I think it's a great framing and a great understanding for people to really try to absorb and understand that while maybe some of the people who talk about it, even let's like bring the scope down a little bit. Like there are plenty of people in the Bitcoin space that I see posting things where I'm like, yeah, I don't really agree with that.
Yeah.
But at its core level, we ultimately are all on a similar mission, if you will, where we believe in this financial freedom tool, and how I want to interact with it and how I want to use it may differ even with just you, Stephen. But ultimately, we all can agree that Bitcoin is a net positive for our own lives, if not the lives of society.
And the ability to tolerate disagreement there is a strength. It's robustness. And for example, like the country would be just as served by the same quality. America's ability to tolerate ideological disagreement while still working together to common goals is a defining factor of social stability. And so it's the same across the board. We have gotten a little out of practice of working alongside people that ideologically disagree with us. And I think we need to relearn that.
No, I cannot agree more with that statement. We've lost this ability to have a healthy disagreement, and we've created these silos and echo chambers, unfortunately, whether it be intentionally or just as a byproduct of the algorithmic lifestyles that we've now become accustomed to. And we need to almost re-strengthen that muscle, that ability to hear something that maybe is jarring or something that just like shakes us because we disagree with it, and sit with it and then converse in a human way. And it goes back again to how we started this conversation of, we need to humanize each other in
Yes.
that process of having those conversations.
Yeah. And I'm encountering this currently. So I recently made the announcement that I'm going to go work on, I'm going to be the VP of Investor Relations for Nakamoto. It's a Bitcoin treasury company. It's a Bitcoin treasury company that invests in other Bitcoin treasury companies. So I'm fundamentally saying, hey, I'm going to go put my time and energy into Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, a lot of people responded very positively to that, but not everybody. Some people really didn't like that. And what I'll tell you is there's an interesting, and I think this is something that a lot of people are going to navigate this year. I think you're going to see a lot of more of these. There might be some news from Swan by the time this publishes, or soon. There are people that reached out to me and said, hey, I don't personally buy these stocks. In fact, I'm lukewarm, or maybe even negative on them. I think, I don't know if they're good. I don't know if they'll work out. And these are even like, there's people that don't think they're good. There's people that don't think they'll work out. There's people that think they're fine but don't want to own them. But I'm really happy for you. And, congratulations, right? It's, there are those responses that say, hey, I may not fully agree with you, but I appreciate people putting their effort and time behind their convictions and trying to work for Bitcoin and trying to do things that they think will improve Bitcoin. And I think that's the right way to disagree, is to say, hey, I might not agree with you, but either at the bare minimum, I'm just happy to talk with you as a person, and I'm able to segregate your personhood from my ideological dispute on this. There's other people that just think it's like, like a complete violation of everything Bitcoin stands for. And those people typically don't want to have a conversation. They typically write you off just by your proximity to an idea that they disagree with. And I think this is like socially weakening. I think this is corrosive to the social fabric. And I think whether on a nation level, on a community level, on a whatever level, on a family level, our ability to have personal relationship while sustaining ideological differences is a strength. It's a harbinger of success. And you'll actually notice that if you can have a personal relationship and foreground that with somebody that you disagree with, you will be more effective at convincing them of your ideological view. Like, people are going to be more likely to hear you. So if you really think you're right, and you really think truth is on your side, the approach is not to hit everybody with a flamethrower. The approach is to say, like, hey, let's have a conversation. Here's my points. Here's my evidence. Here's why I think this. Can you tell me why you think this, or what you think about my points? Right? Like,
100%.
that's the way.
No, you're perfectly bringing it back to how we ended yesterday, or episode 2, which is this idea of like, you win an argument not because you want to win, but by having the conversation with no intention of winning. Just like you become successful in selling when you're not focused on just selling.
You're seeking truth. Your orientation is towards what's true. If your product isn't actually good for your client, you need to fix the product. Correct. You know what I mean? Like, there's not about selling it. It's about fixing the product. If your ideological view or your stance or your opinion on something isn't actually true, well, it's not really about trying to convince someone else now, is it? It's about arriving at the truth and then advocating for the truth.
I want to see, the mistake that was made was someone gave me a microphone again, because now I feel obligated to like really like go down this rabbit hole with you, because I was reading plenty of the comments all over the last week and into the weekend, and it seems to me, historically speaking, I've been in this space in and out for a few years now, but the loudest people in the room tend to be the ones who not only don't want to have that conversation, but also just aren't doing much. They seem to be the ones who are able to hide behind the keyboard, criticize and give their opinions, but when it comes time for them to actually carry out some form of action, there's not a whole lot that they can point to and say, well, this is what I'm building. This is what I'm working on to help expand and grow. And look, whether I agree or not is irrelevant. I will strongman this argument and say
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to have come into the space post the block size wars. And through many conversations with people who were here during it, am very appreciative of the work and the conversations that were had in that moment in time. And there is some validity in this concern, but I think overall it goes back to the root of what you and I are talking about right here, in that there is this lack of desire to just sit down, break bread, and have a conversation with someone that you just know on paper, hey, we are on the opposite side of this discussion. We are on the opposite side of ordinals from last year, or be it the Bitcoin treasury companies in this moment in time.
Cast iron versus stainless steel,
Hey.
the really contentious dispute of our day.
Hey, I believe that I single-handedly helped to resolve this issue. Shout out Josh. Him and I actually sat down. Josh, for those of you who don't know, runs all of and has put together almost every single beefsteak. Professional chef. He put this to rest 100%. So this is no longer a dispute. I think I'm perfectly encapsulating everything that you've said not to do in this moment in time.
So you made a great point. I really love what you said. And on the comment of people that have strong criticisms of many, but do not themselves ever build or work on something. My comment there is, I think the flaw with that, all views are probabilistic. What I mean to say is nobody has 100% probability of being right on their view, right? And so inherently, to work on something, to do something, is to assume a measure of uncertainty. It is to say, hey, maybe there's an 80% chance I'm right on this, but I know there's a 20% chance that I'm wrong, or I could be wrong. I think it's this or it's that. Maybe it's even larger, right? But just because there is a probability that you might not be completely correct about all your assumptions, which, let's be clear, there always is, doesn't mean you should never try to do something. And so I think the real problem with people that shout from the sidelines is just that they don't test. They're not really exposing themselves to the actual risk-taking that is involved with actually doing something and being behind it. And some of these people might hear what I'm saying and respond to it well, I know that holding your own Bitcoin in self-custody is good, and I don't need to go build a self-custody company to talk that. That's true, but there's an implicit claim that you're kind of making there, which is saying nothing new should ever be created, or nothing new should be tried, or there is no need to do anything which doesn't fit in that narrow category. Now that's a harder claim to prove. Maybe you're right, but we don't know that. It's certainly not a 100% chance. And you have to run it against specific counterfactuals. And the counterfactual are the things that are good about Bitcoin, the good things that are good, are those things served by this new idea, or are they hampered by this new idea? Because you can even run a scenario that's saying, hey, there's this thing that isn't Bitcoin self-custody, but a world in which it exists is better than a world in which it doesn't, even if it itself is not that. And that could be because it grows the Bitcoin market, or more people actually learn about Bitcoin and then do self-custody. Or it generates a lot of money and invests in capacity, technical capacity for more, right? These are complex and branching paths. But the problem is none of us have the security of sitting in a castle of 100% probabilistically true views. And so the only way to go about this is to step into just step in and take a risk. You have to take a risk. You have to do something where you are not guaranteed an outcome. And I think that's the problem with people that view it that way, is I think there's just kind of an intellectual flaw in the approach. And, for those people I just really hope you have a good day. I'm wishing you a good day.
I will echo that and even go so far as to say, if you are listening to this and you're like, Stephen, you're absolutely wrong and I'm 100% right on everything, shoot me a DM. I've got a first class flight to Vegas with your name on it, and you and I are going to go and make a lot of money. I have never had anyone take me up on this offer somehow, though. I don't know what it is. I want to I want to share a story because it prompted me to think about this in the conversation around, custody and just the direction Bitcoin has gone, especially over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. It is ingrained in my memory of a podcast that P and I did with John Seth and American Hodl a few years ago, where I think I was complaining about some of the recent news around one of the wallet providers. And American Hodl like really put things in perspective for me that I need to quit complaining, because where we are at that moment in time was so vastly different than 8 years prior to that, when he was first getting in the space and he had to hard code a laptop and create his own wallet solution. We've come so far in just 16 years, but we also, I think, need to take a step back and recognize that we are the early adopters. We are the hardcore Bitcoiners. We are going to be the most inclined to learn about self-custody solutions, what that entails, how to go about it in the proper ways. But the next and further classes of people who end up adopting Bitcoin are going to be less and less inclined to do so. And we need to come up with solutions for them. And that may trigger something in you if you're listening to this as a Bitcoiner and say, no, that's against the ethos of Bitcoin. But I fundamentally disagree. And I personally at least believe that the ethos of Bitcoin is that the market will decide what the general population of users want and need. And if to onboard more and more people involves shared custody solutions or steps away from self-custody, that entails an ability for us to expand the network while still staying true to those of us who are early adopters and who still want self-custody options, solutions, and off-ramps.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's going to take away from that, but rather to expand the network at large to drive greater adoption.
Let me put it like this. Over the last 5 years, I have personally played a role in over $10 billion of Bitcoin going into self-custody. Despite that, I think you're never going to get everybody to do it, and that there is a continuous and ongoing trade-off of growing the network fast enough that it becomes robust enough, that it becomes resistant enough to regulatory attack, and the inevitable technical education and preparation that is necessary to get individuals to take control of their own wealth. So my reason in saying that is not to like brag about a number, but to say that I have literally spent years of my life helping people take self-custody and educating them and setting them up and helping tools be built. And I am fully supportive of that. I am fully in favor of people doing that. But I am not, in doing that, and my experience doing that has just as readily convinced me that that is not something 100% of the human population is going to do. It's probably not something 20%, 30% will do, right? Like, people are going to have different appetites and different natures. And I'll also say that, I know people who should not do it because of let's just call it technical competency and other factors. I know people with memory challenges, right? Like, if you have a memory challenge, there's an additional risk to doing that. And this isn't me speaking poorly about self-custody, but it is highlighting the difference between ideological purity and pragmatic adoption. And there's a trade-off. It's not that one is right and the other's wrong. If you go too far into just being a pragmatist and everything, you inevitably don't do hard things which are good. But if you're too on the ideological purity side of it, where it's just this is the optimal good, anybody who falls short of the optimal good is therefore bad and guilty, you inherently miss a profound opportunity to support your own cause, to support your own goals, to make Bitcoin grow. Like, there are more Bitcoin in self-custody today because there are ways to buy Bitcoin which are not self-custody. That's a true statement. It's unavoidable. And you need to define your milestones and your rubrics, your yardsticks effectively.
And I think you bring up such an excellent point too. What works for you as an individual may not work for your neighbor or your mom or the stranger that you were chatting up at the cafe. I've seen it actually throughout different client calls that I've had the opportunity to join, as well as conversations with our team, that you have to understand what the client's priorities are and serve them in the best way possible. To your point, the largest turnoff would be to set up a client with this self-custody solution, knowing that in fact, hey, this actually might be a little bit too challenging or too difficult for them. And then in turn, they lose their keys, and all of a sudden, all of the time, effort, and energy they spent into setting up this solution, not to mention the money they spent to accumulate Bitcoin, just went down the drain.
And they're turned off. And they now have a negative view of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is no longer a good thing. It's this thing they lost a ton of money in, right? And this should be, I think, a fairly rudimentary point for people to understand. I'll take an edge case. Would you recommend that someone with dementia puts 50% of their life savings into a wallet that they control the key and no one else has the key? Of course you wouldn't, right? You like, anyone can understand that, yes, this is an extreme edge case, but it informs the rule that there are certain criteria that someone needs to meet to put a large amount of their life savings into Bitcoin and self-custody. And so the only conversation we should be having is, what are those criteria? Does this person have them? And then on a side thing, can we lower those criteria as an industry? Because that would be a good thing to do. What if we could build technology and tooling that makes that easier, right? And multisig has done that in certain ways, and other things have done that in certain ways, right? But that's the landscape we're operating in. We're operating in, how do we produce the best outcomes for people? And what do we need to know about people to ensure that we produce the best outcomes?
I love that. And I think that perfectly segues to where I do want to make sure we touch on it and expand a little bit on the earlier point that you made around, we need to build trust in two ways. First is individuals, and then secondarily for the company or the product that you are actually selling. And I think I'd love for you to take a moment just to talk about what types of products you've helped to bring in for Swan clients that you're seeing them be used immediately from day one.
Yeah. So I actually invented one of the products at Swan that's now called Swan Safe Plus. And basically, this is an enhanced custody product. The reason it was invented is we had a client who had a very large amount of Bitcoin in a trust. And legally, they could not take self-custody of it given several factors. So legally, they had to use a custodian. And so basically what we created is a product where all withdrawals are disabled. You cannot log in and withdraw to self-custody. You must pass a video interview with our security team that does an intake interview. Like, it needs to be you on a call. You can still get USD out, but you can't do an on-chain withdrawal. Now, why did the client need this? Because they legally could not take self-custody, and they wanted security. They didn't want it. They wouldn't, like, all of these hacks happen via like the login credentials, right? Like, they happen via not Coinbase, the exchange, having their cold storage hacked, but people's accounts getting hacked by, social engineering and like cloud. You stored the credentials in the wrong place, right? So you can cut off this whole vector by just making it so you can't withdraw. Like, it's just disabled. And so this was a kind of a custody product that we built for a trust client that had certain legal restrictions in how they could hold Bitcoin. And it's not something we like we're not knocking on the door telling everyone, hey, instead of self-custody, you should use this. Like, far from it. But there is a small set of users who have specific circumstances that require this, or this is hugely beneficial for. And so it's just an example that, like, we need to create the solutions that are right for people, not that are just like a line in a certain bucket. And yeah, it's maybe only like sub 1% of users that would ever use this solution, right? It's maybe for a very small amount of people, but a lot of those people have a very large holding amount. They have a lot of Bitcoin, and it's very valuable for them.
I love that. And it is, I think that the key point there is, some of these products aren't for the clients at large. Sometimes it is just catered to a select few clients. But again, that I think helps to, again, show and build trust with these clients that, hey, we hear what your concerns are. We hear what you need. Let's work with you to find the best solution possible. Could we talk a little bit about maybe the other end of that spectrum? Maybe there's a client who comes forward with enough Bitcoin knowledge through their own research, and they're very adamant that they want to self-custody, but actually based on the conversations that you've had, that might not be the best solution for them. How do you navigate a conversation like that?
Yeah, so I think it's just about disclosing the facts, not about trying to make a decision for the client. So it's just explaining, like, hey, I want you to fully understand that this key and its backups, if you ever lose it or someone else gets it, assuming it's a single sig, you have lost access to your Bitcoin. We cannot recover it for you. This is not like a bank account. And you need to just be very clear that they understand the responsibility that they're signing up for. And so, I mean, one of the other things we've done a huge amount of, is helping people set up their self-custody setups. We've done tons of this. The team has done tons of this. We also built a multi-sig product for kind of enhanced security for clients. And so, most Bitcoin bought on Swan has gone to self-custody, the vast majority of it. And we've done a lot of legwork over the years to assist people in getting there. It's all about what's right for the user. Like, that's it. Like, why would you push someone to something that's not right for them? And I think it's only somebody that's like primarily ideologically driven that would deny that 100% of people, like this, that any solution isn't right for 100% of people, right? So, it's just, I think, it's also helping clients. Like, something I've done with clients that are very new to this and don't have the most robust technical skills, they're not digitally native, they're not used to password management, let alone private key management, is saying, hey, set up the wallet, put $500 on there, send some transactions, boot your wallet from the seed. Before you do all of this first, see how you feel. Don't just like transfer a large sum of Bitcoin to this wallet before you've done that. Like, spend some time with it. And a second thing is, like, there's no iron rule of Bitcoin that says all your Bitcoin needs to be in one place. Like, you can spread it out. You don't need a single point of failure. Like, have a few different setups. There's no reason really not to do this in certain senses. Like, if you're very sophisticated, fine. But it's just about having these conversations, you know what I mean? It's just about connecting with where someone is at and where their greatest risk is going to come from. You know what I mean? Like, there's X risk with every custody method. There's X risk with a custodian. But there's also X risk that you make a mistake. And it's evaluating which of those is higher. And also, what are you hedging against, right? Because outside of security concerns, there's also just like monetary, geopolitical concerns, right? The bigger those are, then, okay, maybe it's worth tolerating a little bit more risk because honestly, the risk of maybe confiscation or something else is higher. But again, this is the conversation. It is a conversation. It's working with somebody, it's working with the landscape, and it's working with reality to try to make the best call.
Yeah, I've had my own self-custody solutions, plural. And even to this day, nothing is more anxiety riding in the Bitcoin ecosystem for me than that gap between when my Bitcoin leaves whatever exchange I'm sending it to when it finally shows up in the wallet. To this day, nothing is more anxiety driven. Stephen, before we wind down our conversation for today, I wanted to give you the opportunity to lead the dance for the final stanza. And if there's anything we haven't had the chance to discuss, give you the microphone to just touch on it.
I think it's just worth noting, this is cliche, Bitcoiners say this all the time, we're so early. But in a lot of ways we are. In a lot of ways, very few people in the world deeply understand Bitcoin. And you can see some numbers that get thrown around that's like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, 20% of Americans own Bitcoin. But I think those are misleading. And I think that includes people with like $10 on Coinbase or $50 on Cash App or whatever it is, right? I think a very small amount of Americans, let alone people globally, have over 5% of their net worth in Bitcoin. Like they actually have put a material percentage. And then of those people that have allocated over 5%, I think far fewer of them have ever used Bitcoin directly on chain with a wallet, etc. And so it's just realizing in a very true way, this is early, this is a novel technology, this is something people are learning, people are coming to, people are needing to navigate. And by virtue that you're here and you already understand this, you really are far ahead of most people. And that comes with a certain sort of like moral responsibility to be understanding, to be kind, to understand that like this is very novel for most people and you can't just assume that the way it makes sense to you is the way it makes sense to others. And so just keeping that in mind.
I love that. And so well said, because at the end of the day, it's that cheesy Bitcoiner saying of Bitcoin is for everyone. It is for the people you disagree with. It is for the tech savvy as well as the not so technically inclined. It is for the people here in the US as well as it is for people all over the world. Stephen, I want to thank you again for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. And for everyone who's watching, if you are not already a Swan client, please hop on over to swanbitcoin.com or feel free to set a time with anyone on the team or reach out to me directly, q@swanbitcoin.com. We'll be back very soon with another episode.